Today at ET Infra's Aviation Connect, we are in a conversation with Mr. Sai Pattabiram, the founder and managing director of ZUPPA Geo Navigation Technologies Private Limited, which is engaged in the drone sector. However, ZUPPA is not just a pure play drone developer, but is rather a technology-centric company which has developed proprietary computing architecture, which has applications across unmanned systems such as drones, vision guidance systems, as well as edge computing, which are the need of the hour for the Indian Armed Forces. These are also the very applications which have been tested in the Russian-Ukraine war. One of the flagship products of ZUPPA is cyber-secure navigation autopilot known as Navgati, which ensures that mission-critical drones are not being able to hack and are fully secure. These are one of the lessons that the Indian Armed Forces have learned since Operation Sindoor. With Mr. Sai, we will also explore the procurement process that is adopted by the Indian Armed Forces and why there is a need, or rather reforms, in which the newest technology startups get a level playing field. Mr. Sai, really appreciate you joining us out here at ET Infra's Aviation Connect. Now, you
Thanks a lot.
are the founder of ZUPPA Geo Navigation Technologies Private Limited. I really wanted to understand, the contours and the broad areas that your company is engaged in. And since you are the founder and you have by brick, set up the company,
True.
what was the sort of, raison d'etre for you of setting up ZUPPA?
Yeah. So, uh, good evening to you again, and thanks a lot for having me on this show. It's my pleasure to be here. Now, ZUPA Geo Navigation Technologies, we have one thing that is very unique about us, and that is that we have an indigenous computing architecture for the drone. Now, normally nobody looks at a drone as a computer. It's more looked as an aircraft. But the fact is that the drone is a computer. Because the moment you have taken off the human element of control and you have given the control to an electronic PCB to take care of it, that is the reason why it became unmanned in the first place. So for operating a drone, it needs to compute various inputs that it gets from various sensors, and based on that, it has to decide as to what it is doing. So it is a computer that does, unlike other computers, this is one more layer above, a layer higher in terms of computing, because it is also decision making, and that is what it is. That is why it is, AI in action. It is an edge AI in action, and that is what is drones. So control of a drone electronically is edge AI in action, and it is a real time AI that is, controlling the, is controlling the drone. And why do I say it is a real time AI? Is because the electronics has to control the aircraft exactly like how a human would. So if you had a human pilot, the human pilot would, the way he controls the aircraft or she controls the aircraft is the way the electronics has to control the aircraft. And that is when you can get it to do some outcomes that you want. And that is how it became unmanned, because the electronic PCB replaced the human being. So, having said this, ZUPA is the only Indian company with a cyber security certified, STQC certified autopilot for drones. And this is completely based on our indigenous technology, for which we have a patent from the government of India. So it is a patented computing architecture, a patented indigenous computing architecture. And possibly we are the only company in India who have created a computing architecture on ourselves. So that is where our uniqueness stands. So as of today, as you rightly said, in the current scenarios, especially post the Ukrainian-Russian war and the West Asia war that we have seen recently between Iran and US, one one of the equipment that did a lot of damage on the ally side, which is the US and Israel and the Gulf GCC countries, one if you were to look at one equipment that did a lot of damage at a very low cost, it has been the drone. And that is why, the drone technology is now actually, you can call it as reverse asymmetric situation that has happened in war. Because if you look at it previously, when a tank was replaced the horse, the cost of the tank was more than the horse. When a jet plane replaced a propeller plane, the cost of the jet plane was more than the propeller plane. When a bomb was replaced by a missile, the missile was considerably more expensive than a bomb. But this is the first time now that you are having a drone that is cheaper than the system that is being used to stop it.
Right.
So considering that, it has an economic impact on a country, because if a country is not prepared enough to handle and address the drone threat at a low cost, it can economically drain the country. Because if somebody is going to be using a $4 million missile to take down a $30,000 drone, the asymmetry is nearly to the extent of possibly about 10 to 15 times. So considering, or even more than that. So considering that, it has become very, 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 very important for countries, even from an economic perspective, to have air defense systems and counter drone systems that are competitive to the threat from an economic standpoint. So I
True.
think that is where the changes have come.
Right. The way I understand that one proprietary technology that ZUPPA is bringing onto the table is your Navgati cyber secure autopilot. Now, if you
Correct.
could elaborate a little bit about this technology, because what I understand that the turnaround that has happened in the Russia-Ukraine war is that the Ukrainians have been able to perfect the targeting system on their drones. Now they're able to not actually just hit a tank, they're actually able to hit the most vulnerable part of the tank, maybe at a turret or the back part of a tank, which are much more vulnerable to an explosion or to an impact. Now that obviously must have led to a much more computing power that the Ukrainians, especially the startups, are working on. So help us understand about this Navgati autopilot, if it is in the same domain as to what we are seeing in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah. See, now any drone is controlled by the autopilot. Now the autopilot can be taken to be the motherboard of the drone. Like, just to make it easy for you to understand. Now, if you take a mobile motherboard or a laptop's motherboard, we understand that without the motherboard, it doesn't work. So the same way, a drone cannot work without an autopilot. The autopilot is absolutely central to working of the drone, because that is what controls all the actions of the drones. So the word autopilot itself means autonomous pilot, which means you're having an electronic autonomous pilot who's replaced your pilot, the human factor. Okay. So it's taken off the human factor and got in an electronic or a digital factor. So this is what is Navgati autopilot. Now, when we say it is cyber secure, we have to understand that an autopilot has 4 layers. One is the very obvious layer of the motherboard that we see, which is the PCB or the printed circuit board. But then you have the operating system which operates within it, or the OS as we call it. It might be an iOS, or it might be it might be a Windows OS in the case of a laptop or a computer. In the case of the drone, it is our firmware, which is called a ZUPPA firmware, is what is making the drone work. Then, if you see, there is one layer of communication that happens between you, the user, and the microprocessor on the motherboard, because the microprocessor will not understand the language that you use. So your language or whatever commands you are giving needs to be translated into machine language, something the machine understands. So that conversion and that channelization is done by something called as the control and communication systems, which is the control system for the control and communication algorithms, I would say. So it is the algorithm that communicates the commands to the operating system, and it is the it is the layer through which the algorithms through which your commands goes to the autopilot or to the firmware in the autopilot. So this becomes the next important layer is the command and control protocol. That is very important. Now the next layer is the ground control station, which is also called as a GCS, which is the equivalent of the app or the UI that you use in a regular computing device. So in our case, we control the entire stack from the design of the PCB all the way up to the UI. Everything is a single integrated stack that is owned by ZUPPA, and that is an indigenous creation of ZUPPA. So this is what is the Navgati Autopilot. So the Navgati Autopilot is an indigenous development of ZUPPA of a control system of a motherboard where the entire all the layers of the stack that I just explained are in the control of ZUPPA and have been created by ZUPPA.
Right. I just wanted to have your, expert views. We did see the, the conflict of last year's May unfold, right in real time. There was obviously drones thrown it at us from the other side, and we did our countermeasures as well. For, companies like Zuppa, if you could, and you are the sector expert, if you could give me or share with me the takeaway from the 4 to 5 days of conflict that we had, last year, and what is the key sort of undertaking from that experience, and how Zuppa, and you are a member of the larger drone community in India, are sort of fine tweaking their strategy, because the next conflict, it may be just around the corner.
Yeah. So you see, one of the key there are a couple of key learnings from Operation Sindoor. Now, one of them is that cyber security of the drone is important. That means your adversary shouldn't be able to hack it. There were issues in that area as far as Indian drones that were concerned, which were assembled using Chinese electronics. So this was one of the major learnings that from it. And the second is that the drones have to survive in hostile, conditions where jamming is present across the board. So you have a significant amount of jamming of wireless signal. Within that, it has to survive. Here again, some of the Indian drones, quite majority of the Indian drones did have issues, primarily related to the ability of being jammed. And that was also because, to some extent, I don't think the electronic warfare and the jamming conditions were anticipated by anybody, including the end users. So they were not there uh, in the tender requirements, and so they were not there on the road. So considering this, now there are initiatives being taken by the defense forces to include cybersecurity, to include the need for electronic warfare hardening, and to include the need to survive in survive where there are RF signals are jammed. So these are key requirements that have started, coming into place. And I think that's where a lot of work today is going on, whether it be the end users or whether it be the manufacturers or whether it be the policymakers. I think all are aligned that we need to be able to survive in jamming conditions, as well as we need to be able to operate in jamming conditions. And the fact that our drones should be cyber secure to ensure that we do not have them compromised by the adversary. Primarily because many of the drones today, if you look at it from a warfare vector, are flying ammunition. Let's call them flying ammunition for a very simple term, because they carry an explosive. So any drone that can be compromised when carrying an explosive can be turned on us directly on ourselves, and thereby it can become a threat more than an enabler.
You touched upon the whole Chinese components. Now, this is something that has plagued the Indian drone industry, both on the commercial side or on the military side, in terms of the whole embedding of Chinese parts and components, especially even if we are manufacturing out here in India. Now, that is removing the Chinese components is much more easier said than done, because it's part of the supply chain. That is something you don't have a control. You go to whoever manufacturing, and if they are a very integral part of the supply chain, you simply cannot avoid it. Help me understand, maybe in-house in Zuppa, how you are navigating through it now that you are wholly engaged with the military, with the Indian Armed Forces. The sort of exclusion of the Chinese components or any element of Chinese technology in a drone ecosystem would be very important. How you are navigating through that?
Yeah. So you see, there we have to look at it from 2 points of view. Now, one is the critical systems, which means systems that can be leveraged by the adversary to harm you. And second is there are systems which the adversary cannot do anything with on a drone. So, for example, all the electronics on a drone are critical, including the power electronics which manages the motor flow. All these things are critical, either from a cybersecurity perspective or even from a supply chain perspective. But there are certain non-critical products that you might have, like the frame of the car, of the drone, the propeller, the motors to an extent. These are all non-critical components, which means even if they are not transmitting, so there is no way that a adversary can hack into it. So for hacking into it and for controlling something, you need to have some level of command capability in the system. Okay. So if you do not have a command capability in the system to trigger anything untoward, it is a non-critical component. It is a component that may or may not be Chinese, preferably may not be Chinese, because of the fact that it could be a supply chain risk rather than a cyber risk. Okay. So this is something that we have identified. So our autopilot is, for example, in our case, we design our autopilot. So we use, obviously there is nobody in India who's making, silicon chips for any kind. So we use standard available off-the-shelf silicon chips that are and in our designing of our autopilot. Now, in that case, what happens is we specifically, since we design it ourselves, we specifically choose part numbers that are not Chinese. For example, we use a processor called STM32, which is a company based out of France. So they manufacture their STM32 processor, either in China or maybe in Malaysia or maybe in France or in US. But each of these has a different part number. So we definitely can choose a part number which is non-Chinese. The same way goes for all components that go into electronics. You can deliberately choose part numbers electronic component part numbers that are not Chinese in origin. So this, I think, plays a very, very critical role as far as the cyber security is concerned. Now, as far as the supply chain vulnerability is concerned, there are certain components like the motors which might have supply chain vulnerabilities in the eventuality of a war situation. But under normal conditions, China might be okay selling it, supplying it. But under critical conditions, it could become an issue. So depending on the ability of the buyer to to pay for products, we then work out various systems by which they can if they're willing to pay a higher price for non-Chinese origin motors, yes, we can get them and supply them non-Chinese origin motors. But if they are not willing to pay and they say that Chinese motor is good enough for me, we can continue to use the Chinese router if required, as and when required. And we are also working very closely with many of the motor manufacturers in India. There are quite a few motor manufacturers in India, and we are working closely with them in building alternatives to the Chinese supply chain. Many of them have got to a fairly decent extent to be able to be commercialized. Now it could take another quarter or so for them to actually become commercially manufactured commercially. So that I think is one area where there is scope for improvement in terms of indigenization. But it is something that is a longer term thought process that is required there, because normally most of the people have go in for quick fix solutions, where if you get Chinese at a cheaper price, buy it and fit it. But I think there needs to be some kind of a conscious uh, uh, effort on the part of buyers to make sure that the if you insist on a non-Chinese component or a non-Chinese part being there in the system, the buyers also need to think about paying a better price. At that time, this typical L1 system that happens in RFPs cannot be the benchmark. The technical specifications should say that XXY or X or Y component needs to be non.
Right. One of my questions still related on the technology side before I move on to the procurement part of the whole drone ecosystem, that you are also have expertise in the swarm technology or the swarm capability. Uh, Now both our northern neighbor and our neighbor on the west, it's very highly likely, and this is what experts say, that will deploy swarm drones in the future conflict, so as to saturate our air defense systems and really put us into a lot of pressure. Help us understand ZUPPA's swarm capabilities, how you are designing, and what would be its impact on the battlefield.
Well, I don't think swarm is something new to our national security situation. It happened in May 2025 during operation at the later stage of Operation Sindoor. At that time, maybe on the fourth or the third or the fourth day, or somewhere around then, swarm drones were deployed in very large numbers from the western side, and we did have. I think they were destroyed. About a couple of hundred drones were destroyed at 36 different locations or 26 different locations, something like that. So Turkish Sondar drones were used in that case. So yeah, so swarm is not something that we have not faced. I think swarm is already there. That's something which we have to. And ZUPA is we've got a fully indigenous and kind of sovereign swarm software, and we have been supplying this to the Indian Armed Forces, as well as we have been training their people in the use of swarm technology. So I think swarm technology is there to stay. I think the years of one drone to one operator is in the past, and I think the future is going to be one multiple drones to one operator. And I think we are working with the Indian Defense Forces and Indian Army in particular in training their people in the use of our swarm technology. And there is a positive response going towards that. And I think India should be prepared for handling and addressing swarm incursion. It should be possible for the Indian Armed Forces in if not immediately, but at least over the next year or so.
In your sort of presentation, one of the things that you have highlighted is also the current procurement model from the military. Under the existing model, there is an L1 model. It is highly debatable whether that is the most suitable model for especially military grade procurement. But we have also argued the traditional way where established companies, the ones who are already formally established in the defense side of it, that there needs to be a distinction made as to how you procure equipment from the established players vis-a-vis startups. Help us understand what is it that you're communicating to the government or to the military, and how a new sort of pathway or a sort of way should be there for the procurement, especially on the startup side, because your nature of financing, your nature of incubation, your nature of growth is rather more different than the established players?
Yeah. So you see, it is not something new that is happening globally. Ukraine has a procurement process called Brave One, in which they are, kind of procuring from new age technology companies in a very different way from their procuring traditional equipment from traditional manufacturers. The traditional defense manufacturer. Now, the way that Brave One procures equipment is very different from what it is procured from the traditional defense manufacturers. So I think we have to look at procurement now as two separate streams that need to exist. It's not that you can do away with the stream one, where you're buying small quantities of high value items, like you're buying, say, maybe 50 pieces of tanks, or you're buying 10 pieces of fighter aircraft, or you're buying naval ships, or you're buying some of the kind of legacy systems that exist, like guns, etc. Now they should be having a completely different procurement system as compared to technology intensive and startup kind of companies. The reason for it is very simple. Now, the technologies like drones and similar that startups today are dealing with, technologies like, say, drones, AI, and ML, and those kind of technologies, they are being developed by companies that follow an asset-light model. So to expect us to own a place for 30 years or take a place on lease for 30 years, it is a little it is undoable for us, primarily because of the fact that our business model do not allow capital investment, or not, or I would put it as, are averse to capital investment, because VCs are averse to capital investments. VCs are more than willing to fund working capital and operational expenses rather than fund the traditional capex kind of route. So I think this is a business model that since companies are in that business model, and since more in terms of usefulness for the militaries lie in the companies that are now emerging as compared to the legacy defense manufacturers. So there needs to be one set of procurement procedures that addresses the concerns and the requirements of new age companies and sunrise sector companies, and they can continue to follow the older traditional method as far as the older traditional companies are concerned. But the point is, you cannot apply the rules of the capital procurement that is buying huge large equipment. The same rule can't be applied to a drone today, because when you're talking about quantities, if you talk about tanks, you're talking about a couple of hundred tanks. But when you're talking about drones, Ukraine is going to be producing 20 million drones a year. So which is more than 150,000 drones per month. And if you were to look at that from a perspective of number of days, you're talking of more than producing for more than 5,000 drones per day. So your so the even the quantity metrics in terms of these two different kind of procurement that need to be done by the defense today, even the basic conditional matrices are very different. So there needs to be a second route in terms of procuring new age technology, procuring new age IP, etc.
Right. Have you had any sort of indication from the military or the government if they are sort of moving that way as the one you just suggested and talked about? Is there
As
any?
of now, there is no indication. As of now, it still continues to be the traditional model, where it's a little, I think, dated. because it is applying. It is like there's a joke always of asking all the animals to climb a tree, in an exam. So this is the same kind of situation. So you can't expect an elephant to climb a tree, neither can you expect a fish to climb a tree. So
True, true.
it's similar to that.
True. And because you have also argued that the military or the government should reform towards having short duration demonstration contracts or rapid procurement pathways. And given the fact that the nature of war has changed in the last, let's say, 5 years so much, until and unless you actually go down that path, you will not have those inventory in your, whether it's the Air Force, Army, or Navy to actually counter the next conflict.
Absolutely. Because, see, today the entire procurement is geared towards buying maybe at best 1,000 pieces of an equipment. Whereas when I say that Ukraine is producing 20 million drones a year, we're talking about 1.5 lakh pieces of equipment per month. Now, how can that system, be working when you're talking about when you're applying the rules of 1,000 pieces or couple of hundred pieces procurement? The two can't come each other. I'll give you a simple example. Now, a traditional company which is, say, manufacturing tanks or manufacturing aircraft will produce about 50 aircraft in a year, or at best maybe produce 20 aircraft. Some cases produce 20 aircraft in a year. And tanks, maybe about 400, 500 tanks is what they will produce. But the moment you move to a scale of 1,50,000 a month, the whole metrics changes. You need to be looking at a completely different kind of manufacturing. You need to be looking at electronic manufacturing services companies who are producing phones, who are producing laptops, who are producing washing machines, who are producing earbuds, everything. Those are the kind of people you need to be accessing their manufacturing capabilities to produce that kind of volume. You can't do it in the earlier kind of company. So when you talk about accessing those kind of volumes, they do not fit the bill. Today, because of the fact that under the defense industrial license, I need to have a 30-year lease on land.
Yeah.
Or I need to own the land. But companies like us who are in the new age technology we rather, kind of lease premises and lease things and not increase, your capital assets. So you will effectively, by applying these rules of the current rules to those companies, you're effectively shutting out technology companies out of your procurement supply chain, because they cannot meet those requirements of today. Just to give you a simple example, today Apple, the world's biggest electronic producing company, does not have a factory. So in your defense industrial license, if you say that you need a factory to produce it, Apple will not qualify for your requirements. So I think these are very, very critical, gaps that need to be looked at seriously and that need to be worked around seriously in terms of, the procurement system.
No. Sir, you also have, the established clients, be it the Bosch or the Adanis and the others as your clients. Help me understand, or if you could share, what is the nature of collaboration that you have with the established players? How you are sort of helping them grow up in the ecosystem?
See, frankly, we are dealing directly with the army on many of our sales, and our product mix is focused more towards land forces than towards air force or to the naval side. Okay. So, given that situation, we are dealing directly today with the defense forces. Okay, and one of the reasons I'm saying that this is exactly what I meant earlier, that some of the companies who are traditional defense suppliers have a very different mindset as compared to the current technological kind of company. So at times it's a little difficult and challenging for finding ways of working together. But having said that, we do have engagements with fairly large companies, And where we are having that engagement is in the sales of autopilots for the drones that are made by them. We don't sell them the drones per se, but we sell them the autopilot and the electronics as a component for them to use it. And that is where we find a lot of synergy working with them, and not at the end customer level. But I think having, we need to understand one thing, that successful industries or successful automobile industries work on a kind of a tiered system where you have tier one, tier two suppliers. Aerospace works on the same kind of parameter. So drone currently does not have a very defined and well organized tiered system. But as I see it, over the period of next couple of years, you'll find a tiered system emerging in the drone ecosystem, where component suppliers, where we will be moving more towards being component suppliers, being software suppliers to established OEMs who will be supplying the drones at some point. And I think that is a situation that is still in its nascency, but is evolving. And I think sooner or later we will see it starting to manifest itself, because that is where the manufacturing has to move towards, and that is the way that things will work.
True. So, and also, sir, it's more of a bit of a symbiosis sort of a relationship, because the established players probably will have the capex and the manufacturing facility and all those. But for deep, more AI related technology, then they can come and get the support from you. And I think that's how the symbiosis across different players works out.
Yeah, we could see both models living side by side. Not necessarily that it will work towards, it will gravitate towards one model. Now, we've seen it in the case of mobile phones. We've seen it in the case of laptops and other computing devices. Because let's face it, there from a assembly perspective, or from a assembly manufacturing perspective, assembling a phone or assembling a drone is about the same. You have a motherboard, you have battery, you have casing, and you have other similar kind of accessories which you put together to create a phone. So the same way in a drone also, you have plastic, you have airframe, you have motors, you have speed controllers, you have the electronics. So all that has to be put together. So it's about the same kind of manufacturing process as any other computing device. Okay. So considering that, you could find models where drone companies might evolve into, create, like Apple, evolve into becoming a technology and product developer and marketing. And the in between part of assembly would be left to companies that are currently doing assembly for other electronic devices, like the EMS players.
So my last question would be, you talked about that your prime client is now the army. For ZUPPA, for the near future, if you could share whichever is possible, what are your plans, whether in terms of investment or development new product, and the sort of order book, what kind of order book you currently have, and what sort of order book you are expecting in the future, how the financials and everything would pan out.
Yeah. So you see, the previous was very hard from the drone industry, and not many orders have actually materialized to drone companies. The orders that have been there have been patchy here and there from different sections of the army. Maybe from a unit, maybe from a command, something. It's been a kind of a patchy network of orders. And I think, one thing is that after we got our STQC certification in December, we kind of have already delivered over 500 drones to the Indian Army. And we are now having a fairly decent order pipeline, where we are having we should be getting about, close to about 15-20 crores worth of orders within the first half of the year, which is not the peak part of it, of course. The peak part of drone procurement by the defense forces happens in the second half of the year. But getting these kind of revenues in the first half of the year is quite a encouraging fact, because it's bucking the trend as far as the previous years. It's much better than the previous years in terms of order pipeline as well as the orders in hand. So we have about 50, 60 crores worth of pipeline, out of which we are looking at closing orders worth about maybe about 15, 20 crores within the first half of the year, which means by September of this particular financial year. But this year there are some huge procurements that are scheduled to happen as far as the drone is concerned by the Ministry of Defense. Now there are various categories of it going forward. So, for example, just to give you an example, the Army headquarters is planning buying drones worth maybe about. There was news that they were looking at, say, to at 10,000 to 12,000 crores worth of procurement of drones in this, under the capital procurement scheme. In the recent, delegation of financial powers to Army commanders, that is DFPDS scheme, for the Army commanders, that has increased from a previous 2021, which carried on till 2025 June. It has increased from 850 crores to 3,500 crores, which has to be spent by the 31st of March 2027. So this is a huge opportunity again at the Army commanders level to be able to, generate a revenue. So I think we would be. I don't think a company like ZUPPA, given our uniqueness and the fact that we are the only certified cyber secure certified drone company, I don't think it will be a stretch for us to be able to cross 100 crore plus, or in terms of revenue in this financial year. I think we should be able to. Last year we did close to about 8 crores in total orders. Including certain orders that were finalized late, but we did about 8 crores there. But this year, I think we should be able to easily execute more than 10x, possibly 15 to 20x of that figure, of the last year's figure in this current financial year, given the huge procurement budgets that are coming up at various levels within the armed force.
Right. And lastly, sir, for ZUPPA internally, what are the new areas are you planning to go, whether it's on capacity enhancement or new product development? Are there any things that you have planned for going ahead?
Yeah, so we are the only company who are largely focused on autonomous AI-based interceptor drones. And I think interceptor drones is a huge opportunity that is sitting right in front of us, because interceptor drones are not only required for defense purposes, they are also required for, as counter drone measures for civilian infrastructure, like your energy facilities, like your, nuclear facilities, like your airports, air bases, the seaports, railway infrastructure, dams, etc. All these require to be safeguarded. And today, one thing is that there was some news recently that came that our neighbor has started using satellite-based drones. So, given the satellite-based drones, your jamming and other, countermeasures are not going to work. You'll need to have a direct hit factor on it, and that is to be done by the interceptor. And I think where there is a global opportunity for an Indian company like ours in the interceptor drone segment is the fact that the only credible producer of interceptor drones today to a large extent is Ukraine. And Ukraine themselves are fighting the war, and European companies which are supporting Ukraine are also in the midst of doing the same thing. So I think all of them are more focused on solving their own problem. So I think for them to be able to, make available interceptor drones for a global audience is going to be a challenge. And I think that's where India can step in, because if you look at it from the geopolitical perspective, you are either with China or you're in the opposite side of China. That is the geopolitical reality today. So if you are on the opposite of China, opposite side of China, like what we are, then there are many other countries which are on the opposite side. Then all those countries need non-Chinese origin systems, and that's where I think India can play a significant role in terms of reaching out to the world and producing these interceptor drones for the world. And that is going to be one of the key focus areas that we are going to be focusing in, because we see a larger market for it beyond the defense in strategic air defense also. And we see that as a global requirement at in the Middle East, in Europe, in US, in a good number of countries in the African continent. So I think there is a lot of requirements for these kind of drones, and that is one area where we are having already made the surveillance drones, and we are in the process of building interceptor drones, and that's what we are focusing.
Mr. Sai, thanks a lot for joining us out here at ET Infra's
Welcome.
Aviation Connect. It was a very enlightening conversation with you, and really
Thanks a lot.
appreciate you taking your time out.
Thanks a lot. It was my pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a
much.
lot. Thanks a lot. Thank
Take
you.
care, sir.
Bye.
Thank you.